Just waiting on a few more people to join. Okay, good. We have our, we're about 2 minutes after the hour here, Eastern Time, 2:02 to be exact. Just like to wish everyone a very nice afternoon. My name is Dennis Bruce. I'm the managing partner at 3XM Group. And I'd like to extend a big thank you for attending our webinar today. We understand these are challenging times and that there's no need for us to go into the details about that, obviously, but with folks going more and more remote these days, with everyone working from home, with us not being in our offices, we are leaning more and more on cloud services, and we'd like to talk a little bit about that today, specifically in the area of security. Before we get into that, though, I'd like to say a few words about us, about the 3XM Group. We are a team that was founded in 2011, now in the 9th year of operation, offices in US and Argentina, 100 plus projects successfully delivered, and ISO 9000 certification. It's been a great ride with the team. Seen the team grow, nearly double in size, or more than double in size, actually, in the last few years. So it's been great working with the team. 5 service areas: cloud, software development, DevOps, data engineering, and security. And today, when we talk about security, we're going to talk specifically about security on the cloud, and more specifically on the AWS cloud. So we're going to cut across 2 service areas today, that being security and cloud. And obviously, when we talk cloud, there's a lot of DevOps mixed into that as well. So we'll be hitting on a few of our service areas today during the webinar. Just a few words on our format today. Our cloud security architect, Mr. Alfredo Pardo, will be presenting. Alfred will present the detailed agenda, specific topics throughout. During the webinar, we'll be collecting any questions you have, which you may enter in the chat. We'll address them at the end, if that's okay, and we appreciate your patience on that. A couple more words about the webinar, actually, is that you will see at the top of the presentation a registration link. You'll see that on all the slides, so I just want to mention that briefly. Alfred's going to get into more details about that, including how we can help you with that. That is simply a link to register for a free security assessment. And Alfred will be explaining that more towards the end of the presentation, a little bit more detail of what that's about. So if you want to just hold off, you want to go ahead and register, but if you need more information about what that entails, what we're going to be doing, what you're going to get out of it, then please hold off until the end of the webinar, and Alfred will get into that explanation. So with that all said, once again, thank you for joining. I'd like to turn it over now to Mr. Alfredo Pardo, Alfred, to our cloud security architect, and he'll walk us through the presentation. Alfred, all yours.
Thank you, Dennis. I had an inconvenience with my connection. Let me try to share my screen again. Please let me know if you're able to see it.
All good, Alfred.
Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of 3XM Group, allow me to extend a warm welcome to you. Let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Alfredo Pardo, and I'm the Cloud Security Architect at 3XM Group, certified in AWS Security. And today I'll be talking about how to control the AWS Security Monster. My objective today is to mention some risks and implied costs of not properly protecting your cloud environment, to provide some recommendations about where you should start when thinking about cloud protection, and to tell you how we are successfully addressing this problem. Let's start talking about risks and costs. While the cloud brings many benefits, it comes with challenges. Just to give you some background, let's start talking about some risk of not protecting your cloud environment from the security perspective. Improper configuration in some services can cause failures because of denial of service attacks, which is when a service becomes unavailable by stressing it, or denial of wallet when a significant increase of cost occurs for this highly demanded service, exhausting our budget. Today, many applications require usage of several resources in order to accomplish their goal. Each of these has its own recommended configuration from the information protection perspective, resulting in a potential greater attack surface. Clear separation of duties among your cloud users and applying the least privilege principle, which says that someone must only have accurate permissions on the resources they need to run in their daily activity, may be troublesome, especially in larger environments, producing these privileges being out of control. If you are in an industry that regulates data security, for example, HIPAA has requirements for healthcare providers, or PCI DSS for anyone handling credit card data, like financial institutions or e-commerce sites, you should have everything in place for an audit. Any exposure of sensitive information or data breach will inevitably lead to legal exposure and obligations. Sometimes application logging is not properly configured and in cloud resources is not turned on by default. Additionally, actions may need to be taken when a specific service or event is found within your logs. Incorrect design generates lack of visibility in your environment. And last but not least, a breach of your data or your client's data can be devastating depending on the extent of the breach. The loss of brand reputation can be enough to shut the company doors. Let's now turn to some facts for 2020. According to the sources listed below, csoonline.com, which is a security news and research website, and DivvyCloud, which is a security solutions company, these are the facts for this year. 60% of breaches involve vulnerabilities for which a patch was available but not applied. Data breaches cost enterprises an average of almost $4 million. 40% of IT leaders recognize that cybersecurity positions are the most difficult to cover. Most data breaches have been motivated by financial reasons, 71% as they indicate. Cloud security misconfigurations facilitated nearly 200 data breaches, exposing 33 billion records with a cost of $5 trillion. This means inexperienced users configuring the environment, a failure to shift from outdated security models, a lack of unified cloud visibility, and a high volume of changes. 3 services were identified as the most common source of the breaches, and they are Elasticsearch, S3 Buckets, and MongoDB, the NoSQL database server. Diving deep into data breaches, this is one of the most recent reports from April this year. This data shows that in terms of breaches per sector, the most affected was business, mainly e-commerce, concentrating almost 60% of the total, and the second highest was healthcare, with more than 30%. This adds up to 18 intrusions in just 1 month. In the same report, but considering the number of affected records, the percentage varies, positioning the healthcare sector first, with a difference exceeding 70%, followed by business. And something curious is that even though the government and military sectors had incidents, the attackers were not able to steal records. So I have a question for our audience at this point. How many of you have heard of a recent data breach in the cloud? Please write in the chat. Yeah, we have a lot of breaches continuously happening. Okay, let's now turn to our attention to how the attackers usually use our information. They will look through the stolen data files for authentication credentials, personal information like names, addresses, and phone numbers, and financial information like credit card details. Once they have authentication credentials, they look for potentially lucrative accounts. Government and military addresses are very valuable, as well as company email addresses and passwords for large corporations. Interestingly, healthcare data is worth much more than credit card data. That's because the personal information found in healthcare files can be used to create a social security card or to fake an entire identity. Hackers commonly sell personal identifiable information, also known as PII, on underground marketplaces that are accessible on the dark web. Typically, PII will be sold in bulk. The dark web, in case you are not familiar with the term, means a set of encrypted networks that have been intentionally hidden from view and require special software to access. The process of offloading the cards usually involves a broker who buys credit card information in groups of 10 or 100 and sells that to carders. And they buy gift cards, for example, from stores, and then use those cards to buy physical items. These products are finally sold in legitimate channels like eBay. In some cases, attackers use your stolen data to commit fraud. Although this is likely to attract the attention of authorities, it does happen. Some examples are applying for bank loans or credit cards, making fraudulent health insurance claims, requesting money from your contacts using your email and social media accounts, among other things. This could potentially impact your credit history and credit score. Let's now turn to the most commonly compromised AWS services. I think everyone has heard about the data breaches like the Capital One incident. This could have been avoided if one of the most common AWS services, as S3 is, had been appropriately configured. Let's see other cases that McAfee, formerly Sky-High Networks, discovered. At Dow Jones, personal data was leaked for more than 2 million customers, including email addresses and the final 4 digits of some credit cards. At Verizon, sensitive data was exposed for 6 million customers, including name, phone number, and account PIN. This may happen when an AWS S3 bucket is configured as open to the public. Anyone who finds the link can access the data effortlessly. Sky-High found that 7% of all S3 buckets had unrestricted access and 35% were unencrypted. The data on AWS is only as secure as the administrator who managed the environment, who is responsible for configuring and monitoring activity. Companies may have hundreds of S3 buckets periodically changing configurations, and the process of manually auditing this is prone to human error. The shoemaker's son always goes barefoot. As an illustration of a potential attack to IAM, or Identity and Access Management, a company called UpGuard discovered a GitHub repository of an AWS engineer containing personal identity documents, system credentials, including passwords, AWS keepers, among other personal information. One of the files was called rootkit.csv, suggesting that it provided root access to the user's AWS account. Additionally, when reviewing his files, they encountered AWS resource templates and log files with host names and to potentially identify AWS customers being assisted by the engineer. Bank statement correspondent with AWS customers, multiple documents, including the owner's full name and documents marked as Amazon Confidential. To validate this, they matched the exact full name with a LinkedIn profile, listing AWS as his current employer. 2019 was especially a bad year for Instagram. This social network had one of its business partners expose an AWS database with almost 49 million records from their users because of a database without a password. With no password required to access the data, the database, which was growing by the hour, contained data users shared publicly, such as bios, profile pictures, and number of followers. More concerning, those records were linked to private data as well, such as email addresses and phone number. Among the records were many high-profile celebrities and influencers. Gartner, which is a world leader in research and advisory, expects that through 2025, 99% of cloud failures will be the customer's fault, and this will happen in 90% of organizations failing to control public cloud, which will produce inappropriately shared sensitive data. I now like to move on to the next section, where to start. Security and compliance is a shared responsibility between AWS and the customer. This model shows that AWS is responsible for security of the cloud, and this means protecting the infrastructure that runs all of the services, including hardware, software, networking, and facilities. On the other hand, the customer is responsible for security in the cloud that will be determined by services they decide to use. This establishes the amount of configuration work the customer must perform as part of their security responsibilities. For example, a service such as Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud or Amazon EC2 is categorized as infrastructure as a service. And this requires the customer to perform all of the necessary security configuration and management tasks, including updates and security patches, any application installed on the instances, and the AWS provided firewall called a security group. We also have abstracted services such as Amazon S3, where customers are responsible for managing their data, including encryption options, classifying their assets, and using IAM tools to apply the appropriate permissions. AWS takes care of the rest in this case. Center for Internet Security, CIS, whose website is csecurity.org, offers information security products, services, tools, and suggestions, among other things, for cloud providers, virtualization, operating systems, database servers, etc. And the recommended configurations provided in these documents should be the minimum baseline for components in IT environments. Being specific for AWS, we have two different benchmarks. Let's review the first one, which offers the foundations to configure your account. We have four main sections in this document with 49 controls. Identity and access management makes recommendations such as avoiding usage of the root account, using multi-factor authentication, for logging, disabling using unused credential, rotation of access keys for programmatic access, password policy, among others. Logging enforces the usage of CloudTrail to monitor all the AWS API activity in all regions, recommends protection of CloudTrail logs through integrity validation and proper configuration of the S3 bucket, and VPC flow logging in all VPCs. Monitoring takes care of configuring metric filters and alarms for different security events, and networking prevents accessing administrative ports like 22 for SSH and 3389 for RDP from anywhere, and has a least access policy for VPC peering. Regarding the second benchmark, it digs into three-tier web applications and has 6 main sections with 96 controls. Data protection requires configuration for encryption, in transit, and address for the different application layers. Identity and access management enforces the utilization of roles to grant permissions to EC2 instances and auto-scaling groups, and also SNS notification configurations. Business continuity provides recommendations for load balancers associated with auto-scaling groups, multi-availability zones, and backups enabled for RDS databases, health checks for applications, among others. Event monitoring and response ensures that notifications are enabled for resource events, alarms, and billing alerts. Audit and logging enforces the tagging of resources, logging within resources, and encryption checks. And networking recommends configurations for the CDN, or Content Delivery Network, DNS records, subnets, route tables, security groups, among others. This is what the CIS Benchmark Control looks like. It has a title, a description, an explanation, and the audit steps usually executed through the command line interface or the AWS console. When companies are starting their migration to the cloud, they should consider the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, which provides guidance for implementing cloud-based systems. It has a security perspective document to help you correctly structure your selection and implementation of controls for your organization. For each component, this white paper discusses specific actions you can take and the means to measure progress. Directive controls establish governance, risk, and compliance models the environment will operate within. Preventive controls protect your workloads and mitigate threats and vulnerabilities. Detective controls provide full visibility and transparency over the operation of your deployments in AWS. And responsive controls drive remediation of potential deviations from your security baselines. In order to assist with this process that will transform your organization and secure the cloud journey, AWS has the Cloud Adoption Framework Security Epics. This consists of groups of user stories that you can work on during sprints. Each of these epics has multiple iterations addressing increasingly complex requirements and layering in robustness. Implementation of a data classification program can simplify cloud adoption and management. Data classification is a foundational step in cybersecurity risk management. It involves identifying the types of data that are being processed and stored in an information system owned or operated by an organization. It also involves determining the sensitivity of the data and the likely impact the data should face in case of compromise, loss, or misuse. To ensure effective risk management, organizations should aim to classify data by working backwards from the contextual use of the data and creating a categorization scheme that takes into account whether a given use case results in a significant impact on an organization's operations. For example, if data is confidential, it needs to have integrity and be available. Each data classification level should be associated with a recommended baseline set of security controls that provide protection against vulnerabilities, threats, and risks in accordance with their designated protection level. Overclassification of data can also cause costly controls that impact your business operations. A step-by-step approach when developing data classification policies should be establishing a data catalog. This means conducting an inventory of various data types that exist in the organization, how they are used, and if any of them are governed by a compliance regulation or policy. Once the inventory is complete, you should group the data types into one data classification level, the organization and the different data classification levels the organization has adapted. Assessing business critical functions and conducting an impact assessment, an important aspect determining the appropriate level of security for datasets is to understand the criticality of that data for the business. Following an assessment of business critical functions, customer can conduct an impact assessment for each data type. Labeling information implies running a quality assurance assessment to ensure that assets and datasets are appropriately labeled in their respective classification buckets. Additionally, it may be necessary to create secondary labels for data subtypes to differentiate particular set of data within a tier due to privacy or other compliance concerns. Handling of assets occurs when datasets are assigned a classification tier. Data is handled according to the guidelines appropriate for that level, which include specific security controls. These handling procedures should be formalized, but also can be adjusted as technology changes. Continuous monitoring takes care of security, usage, and access patterns of systems and data. This can be done through automated or manual processes to identify external threats, maintain normal system operations, install updates, and track changes to the environment. In addition to implementing a data classification scheme, it is equally important to place the responsibility of data classification on data owners, as they are the best positioned to determine the value, use, sensitivity, and criticality of their own data. It is the customer's responsibility to classify the data and implement appropriate controls within their cloud environment, like encryption, for example. So far we have seen that we should implement more than 140 controls and different processes to have an acceptable security posture. So my question for the audience will be, how many of you think this is an intimidating task? I hope you sure consider this an intimidating task. So let's discover now how we are successfully addressing this problem. We found that in order to make decisions for larger environments, you need to have everything clearly identified within your environment. How many resources you have? Do you know to whom they belong to? Which type of information they handle in terms of sensitivity? Centralized information to be acted on. If you have a large environment, reviewing every resource using the console is a daunting task. Having the information centralized and organized is essential. Different views of the same information for better decisions. You probably want to see which controls are non-compliant within your environment, which resources have those faulty configurations, and you may like to focus on a specific resource to consistently clean up all of those findings. Continuous monitoring to maintain a security posture over time. Every day, resources are being added to your cloud account, and controls should be applied immediately if you are serious about protecting your information. In order to accomplish this and to offer additional value to our customers when delivering security services, we have developed CloudThor that centralizes, organizes, and makes it easy for you to identify security threats within your environment. Let's run the video to see how it works. The first screen that is shown is the Cloud Security Dashboard, where we have the controls with their status grouped by account. For each control, we have a description and the non-compliant items. We can review the details for each of these items, an S3 bucket in this case. Here we have the list of controls being applied to this resource, an indicator of whether they are compliant or not, using green and red, and further explanation. Returning back to the dashboard, let's say that we want a general view of the S3 buckets from a security perspective. Going to AWS, resources, storage, and then S3, we have a list of buckets and the compliance status in columns. Clicking on each of these buckets, we go to the screen that we have previously seen. Let's turn now to network controls. We have a list of security groups that have excessive permissions by allowing connections from anywhere. Let's see the details for one of them. In this case, it is allowing unrestricted connections to SSH from anywhere. Having a password to protect your AWS account today is not enough. You need to enable multi-factor authentication for root account and console users, and also check the programmatic keys they are using are being rotated frequently. Here we have some controls for that. You can also have details about how your password policy is configured in terms of complexity. This is if they require lowercase and uppercase characters, numbers, symbols, their minimum length, among others. In order to comply with the data classification scheme, you may have defined tags, identified resources within your environment. We can review the missing tags going to AWS and then inventory. This report will help us to have all the resources properly identified. We have also been working on alternative ways to receive this information, in this case without leaving your communication tool. Let me run this video. Okay. All right, here we are using Mattermost, which is an open source alternative for Slack and has complete Markdown support. In this case, we are querying the current status of our cloud controls, and we receive details of the account, category, and control, similarly as we have seen in the UI. We can also request details for resources, S3 in this case, and we have the same information on the matrix seen in the UI, showing compliant and non-compliant items and tagging related information. This has also been tested in Slack, which has more limitations in terms of Markdown support, but allows showing the same information. In this case, instead of a direct message to the bot, we are requesting the response in a group, so your team can be in sync about what needs to be fixed. We have also prepared an easy-to-use and well-documented REST API. Therefore, the integration of Cloudflare with your CI/CD pipeline is a straightforward task. So let's summarize what we have seen today. These are the key takeaways from this session. The cost implied with not considering your cloud security posture when migrating to the cloud can be destructive. Data breaches are on the rise and will be caused by customer misconfigurations. You have to implement a large set of controls and processes to have an acceptable security posture. Centralizing information from your environment is essential to take actions conveniently. And having this information in real time can facilitate even more managing your team's workload. And we want you to receive additional value from this webinar by offering a free AWS Cloud Security Report so you can see what Cloudflare has to offer. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Thanks for your attention, and now I'll take any questions you may have.
Looks like, thank you very much, Alfredo.
You're welcome.
We're looking for some questions. We've got a few questions here, Alfredo. Let me, I'll read them off to you. It looks like, how long does it take to run the tool over an environment, what type of access do you need? I guess that is in reference to CloudTor.
Okay, the tool runs really quick, and we need, so far at this point, for the functionality we currently have, the least privilege, which is auditor access. So we have read-only access, and we don't need more than that to provide you with a report of your current security posture.
Okay. And how complex is it to set up? How long would it take, to set it up and run it? What's the typical time it would take? Is there some estimation?
Yeah, it's really simple. You have only to create a role within your account, and we will run the tool from our account. So you just only have to provide us with auditor access through a policy, and that's it. It's really simple.
Perfect. Okay. And so so Laura comes up with a question here. She is asking the tool, the end product of the tool will be a report, correct? So so run the assessment, run the tool will produce a report, and that's the deliverable that will be handed over to the client.
Those are different things. We are offering a free assessment today, which is a PDF file with all the information regarding your security posture, your currently security posture. And the tool is something that you run for continuous security monitoring. So that is a different piece of information, and you have real-time information, and it is continuously being updated.
Okay, understood. All right, so those are the questions we have so far. I'd like to remind everybody again, in case there are any more questions that come up, that you see on the top of the screen that there is a registration link for the free assessment that Alfredo mentioned. So we encourage you to take advantage of that. Obviously, there's no cost, no obligation. Alfredo has explained what it takes to set up the tool with auditor access. We can no more than that. We can run the tool and produce and give you a snapshot really of what your security profile looks like today, and maybe talk about some recommendations on anything that needs to be rectified. So we'll just hold on here and see. I do see a couple more questions coming on. We did talk about the permissions. You said that was audit permissions.
Yeah, correct.
So let's see if we have any more questions. If not, we can wrap up. Oh, here we go. We have some more. How long does the assessment take? That's from Kendi. Ask, how long does the assessment take?
Well, that depends of how many assessments we have, but if we are running the tool, the assessment is really quick. We have almost everything automated, so it takes a question of minutes. You can have a status of your current security posture.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Alfred. So does the tool have, this is from Sebastian, so does the tool have auto remediation for simple findings? Is there anything that the tool can do? What actions will it take?
It is actually in our roadmap. It is not a functionality that the tool currently has, but we are working on that. We are currently gathering information from the environment, but we are planning to provide automatic remediation for simple findings. Okay,
perfect. Okay, I think we've got another question coming over the line here. So Ignacio asks, could you integrate this tool into a pipeline? I suppose that means a release pipeline.
Yes, as I was mentioning in one of the last parts of the presentation, we have a REST API that it is well documented, and you can easily integrate with your CI/CD tool. So it is something that you can use within your pipeline.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Alfred. So once again, we'd like to remind the audience that if you are interested in this assessment and seeing really what what the findings could be for your environment, I urge you to, or encourage you to register following the link there on the registration button, and we'll certainly get that scheduled for you. And I'm not seeing any further questions, Alfredo, so I think that we've addressed the ones already. Let's see, one last look here. Yeah, I think we've taken care of all of the questions that have come over. So I'd just like to say to our audience, on behalf of the whole team at the 3XM Group, and especially Alfredo Pardo, the Cloud Security Architect, who gave us a great presentation today, I'd like to thank you all and look forward to connecting with you again, either through the assessment or some other way. You can certainly contact us, contact me for any of your cloud needs, be they security related or anything else really to do with the cloud. We have quite a large team of AWS certified engineers in security, in cloud migrations, and in different disciplines as well. So if there's anything we can help you with, we certainly are ready to discuss those with you. And once again, look forward to connecting with you in the future. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you all.
Thank you, Alfredo.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.